We live in a strange time. From one point of view, the Jewish community has never been more powerful in terms of its wealth and influence, and in terms of the fact that Israel is today on the verge of becoming a major power. Even though certain surveys doesn't have Israel as one of the 10 most powerful nations, it's hard-pressed to imagine Israel not being one of the 10 most powerful nations on earth, being that Israel has missiles, Israel has nuclear weapons, Israel has a defense industry that's advanced, and is also on the cutting edge of advanced defensive and offensive weaponry. Apparently, Israel is developing a defensive laser, which will be almost 99.9% effective against incoming missiles. So this kind of technology, together with the fact that Israel has extensive gas reserves, which according to the estimates can give Israel enough energy for the next 400 to 500 years, this makes Israel into a nation where it is self-sufficient in terms of its energy production and self-sufficient in terms of producing its own defensive weaponry. And there are very few nations on earth like this, and Israel is certainly one of the 10 most effective armies and defense systems in the world. That doesn't make Israel a superpower, it makes Israel a significant power. And this is at a time when the Jewish community worldwide is imploding. Why is it imploding? It's imploding because of intermarriage. It's been doing this for the last 30, 40 years, and it's only a question of time when this will begin to erode not just support for Israel, because that's already happened, but it will also erode the effectiveness of Jewish political fortunes in the Western world. Political fortunes are affected by the number of people you can count on for voting. Even though that there's a recent survey that indicates that that Jews have increased in this country, certainly in terms of identifying as not just practicing Jews, but identifying as Jews, that has lessened. And the fact that when pressed, people say that they come from Jews and would probably be considered Jewish, does not make them as active Jews. That's the unfortunate part about it. And the reason for that is the attitude that has been developed over the last 40, 50 years by certain elements in the Jewish community, most notably the Reform community, not the Reform people, Reform Jewish people, but the rabbinate, embracing intermarriage. And what's so bad about embracing intermarriage? Are you a racist? Do you dislike other people? The answer is no, I don't dislike other people. But that doesn't mean I have to marry them. There's a difference between hatred and marriage. And the reason for marriage is for procreation, for developing the human species. And as Jews, to promote Jewish population. Jews numbered the same amount, approximately, as Chinese when the temple was destroyed. In fact, it might have been more Jews in the world at the time than there were Chinese. The Chinese today are 1.4 billion. Jews are 1% of that. That's the horrific part of this. The world has practiced negative population growth on Jews for the last 2,000 years. And therefore, the purpose of marriage would be to repopulate the world's Jews, not just the number that we have, but to have the Jews in the same proportion as we were when we were a great nation in Judea. That would be the purpose. When you promote intermarriage, you're promoting the destruction and the death of the Jewish people. Everybody knows that, but everybody's afraid to say it. I'm not. I have nothing against Gentiles. I'm against Jews and Gentiles marrying. If they do marry, God forbid, then I have instructions to try to have the spouse that's not Jewish to convert that person, to convert him to the belief in Torah mitzvahs, so that they can continue with their families till Mashiach comes. This week's Parsha has Moshe Rabbeinu marrying someone that was not from the family of Jacob. It was from an Abrahamic family, a family related to us, our cousins to the east of us, the Midianites. The Midianites were children of Abraham, or Abraham. Midian was one of the 6 sons of Keturah. If you believe that if Keturah is, as an opinion in the Medrash, that Keturah is Hagar, then Midian is a brother of Ishmael, one of the 6 later sons of Abraham, and one of 7 brothers, if you include Ishmael with them. But Midian was different than Ishmael. Midian was born when Keturah was the official wife of Abraham, of Avraham Avinu. And as such, there are different halachas regarding those people. But still, they were not Bnei Yankiv. They were considered Bnei Noach. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest Jew that ever lived, till Mashiach will come. Moshe Rabbeinu, the teacher of the Torah, married somebody who was not born as a Jew and as a Bas Yisroel. So the question is, how is it that the greatest Jew ever should marry what you would commonly call a shiksa? So the answer is, she wasn't a shiksa. How did that happen? The story goes as follows. Moshe Rabbeinu saw an Egyptian brutalizing an Israelite, a slave, but an Israelite, for no reason. The man wasn't slacking off of work. The man wasn't trying to shirk his way out of work. The man suspected this Egyptian taskmaster of fooling around with his wife. And it was true. The man had violated the code of ethics of the ancient world. You don't violate somebody else's wife. When the taskmaster realized that the slave knew what he had done, the taskmaster started whipping the man to death. Moshe Rabbeinu saw this, knew what happened, and it says, Vayachas HaMitzri, he smote the Egyptian and he killed him. He buried him in the sand, but it became known through Jewish informants, Israelite informants, who disliked the fact that there was a man who believed in a moral code who wasn't their quote-unquote slave brother. And Moshe had to run away from Pharaoh. He goes to Midian. We don't know exactly when he goes to Midian. Apparently, according to the Medrash, he ran away to Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, he was a king for about 40 years. Finally, approaching 80, certainly an advanced age, Moshe Rabbeinu decides to leave Ethiopia and go to an area outside of the influence of Egypt, which was Midian. And there was a Kohen Midian. There was a leader of the Midianites that had been excommunicated. Why was he excommunicated? Because he believed in the Abrahamic God, not in the pantheon of gods that were the style of the day. The Midianites rejected the single God of Abraham because they were angry and upset that Abraham gave his inheritance of his spiritual name to Isaac, to Yitzhak. Midian was excluded. He was fair. He gave them gifts. He gave them financial security. He even gave them spiritual direction. But the Abrahamic code, the code that he was privy to, and only he was privy to, he gave over to Yitzhak, nobody else. And Midian was very, very upset, and as a result of that, they embraced the gods of the ancient world together with Abraham's God. Yisro was a purist. Yisro you would call to be a fundamentalist. Yisro did not believe in mixing of gods. Either there is only one God or there are no gods. The sun can't be God. The sun is just a moving planet, a moving star. So is Jupiter, so is Mars. They're not intellects. They're not the setters or the teachers of morality. Why should we follow a star or a planet? Didn't make sense. There has to be an original creator who put values, who put standards into the world that we accept. And the only one that made sense was that of Abraham. And so Yisro went back to the God of Abraham. And his daughters went with him. And these daughters were now being observed by Moshe Rabbeinu, by Moses. They were hard-working girls. They were shepherd girls, because Yisro had no sons to that point. And they brought their father's flock to the wells early morning so that they should be able to give them water. Unfortunately, as they were ready to give the waters to the flock, the shepherds of Midian came. The shepherds, knowing that Jethro had rejected their tribalistic gods and that he had been excommunicated, chased the girls away. Moshe Rabbeinu was the paradigm of justice. He couldn't stand injustice. And as soon as he saw the unfairness, the girls had woken up early and come earlier than anyone else, including these shepherds. And just because they were bigger and better and stronger didn't mean that they were justified in chasing the girls away. The fact that they were excommunicated for believing only in the Abrahamic God was not something that Moshe Rabbeinu considered to be a fault. He considered it to be a virtue, and immediately recognized that this was wrong. It was wrong for man, and it was wrong by the standards of God. and he flew into action. And he chased away 4, 5, maybe 6 shepherds in the process. Less than 3 shepherds would not have chased away the 7 girls. The 7 girls were tough girls. Shepherd girls are tough. There had to have been not 2 shepherds or 3 shepherds, there had to have been at least 4. So Moshe Rabbeinu took on 4 shepherds at a time at least. Might have been as many as 6. And he took them on and he chased them away. It shows you the power of a principled individual going forward without fear. Yes, Moshe was stronger, but still they outnumbered him, and yet they fled for their lives. And then Moshe Rabbeinu did the chivalrous thing of watering the flock. So he chased the shepherds away, saving the girls from attack, perhaps sexual molestation. He saved the girls, and then he saved them time because he watered the flock. And they come home. They come home instead of at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 3:30 in the afternoon, they're coming home at 9:30. And Yisro looks at the sundial, he says, wait a second, this is not the afternoon. What are you doing so early? You never get here in time this early. Unless you wake up extremely early, which I know you didn't, but usually get chased away. What happened? And the girls said, the girls did not tell Yisro what had happened. Usually, a bunch of girls, remember, they're being excommunicated. They ain't no men who are going to marry them. And a man saves them. A brave man saves them. And a man who is so courteous that he waters their flock for them. According to the Gemara, the waters actually rose toward him. So they saw miracles from him as well. A man of power, a man of kindness, a man of the spirit. And they don't want to talk about him? How does that work? So they tell their father, Ish Mitzri Yisilanu Minaroim. An Egyptian man saved us from the Midianites, from the shepherds. Yisro gets, after hearing all that happened, he gets alarmed. And where is he? Usually, you would say, this is not menschlich. Guy does you a favor, at least show him back some kind of favor. But Rashi, a great commentator, says, no, he wasn't just saying, he did you a favor, just not menschlich. He says, where is he? Call him and give him some bread. Maybe he'll marry one of you. Where does Rashi get that? And how does Yisro know that? And Yisro, the answer is Yisro understood. Usually when a thing like this happens, girls can't stop chattering. You know, when you have cheerleaders, why do you have cheerleaders? What are the cheerleaders about? Well, that happened naturally. Cheerleaders were an evolution of girls who watched a football game. And they couldn't stop talking about the exploits of the great players. So they made it official. Instead of chattering and talking about it, they should jump up and down and use pom-poms and batons as cheerleaders for everybody. Because girls like to talk about the exploits of a powerful man. And here the girls weren't talking. Why weren't they talking? They should have been gushing. A man came. And you know what he did? He chased 4 guys down with his bare hands. And you know what else? He watered our flock, and the water came rushing toward him. Why didn't they say that? And Yisro realized it was in those three words. Ish Mitzri Hitzilanu, an Egyptian man saved us. An Egyptian man. Why did they think he was Egyptian? Well, his clothes were Egyptian. Like the prince that he was wearing Egyptian clothing. His haircut was similar to Egyptian haircut, that with a ponytail, with the rest of his hair shaved, just like the Egyptians were. He looked and spoke Egyptian. But his demeanor was not that of an Egyptian, and what sealed it was that the water came rising toward him. The only people for whom the water rose in the ancient world were the children of Jacob, children of Abraham, the children of Jacob. And therefore he says, Ayo, where is he? You're making a mistake. This is not an Egyptian. This is a cousin of ours who believes in the God of Abraham. And so the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu marries one of Yisro's daughters is because all 7 girls, all of them, refused to talk about the man who saved them because he was a Mitzri. In their mind, he looked as an Egyptian, talked like an Egyptian. He must have been an Egyptian. And they, after all they had sacrificed for the belief in one God, would not marry an idolater, somebody who believes in many gods. And the girls were willing to remain as old maids, not to marry somebody who worshipped deities that were false. And so the merit of Tziporah was she would rather remain single than get married to someone with a strange faith that believed in multiple gods. That kind of a woman was worthy of being married to the great Jew that Moses was. That kind of sacrifice is a sacrifice worthy of a Jew. And so, my dear friends, brothers and sisters, look what Tziporah did. She would have rather remained single than marry someone from a strange faith, believing in a different God. How can you give up your special pedigree? The pedigree of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and give it up by intermarrying. So what's so terrible? Intermarriage is good. It's good if you're just an ordinary person. But you're from Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. You're a member of the tribe that the world has tried to destroy. And God says, no, they're not going to be destroyed. They are an eternal people. You're a member of the eternal people. You have the obligation of passing it on. Not just verbally. You have to pass on the legacy to your children, to your biological children. The Jewish nation has been decimated for the last 2,000 years. We are 1% of the population of China. We would be less than 0.5% if China hadn't had its policy of one child per family the last 30, 40 years. I think it may be even more. China has 100 times as many people as we do. They never were brutalized. There were no Holocaust against the Chinese. We have to repopulate our people. We have to make sure that the Jewish people survive the next generation. If you young people will intermarry, that means there will be no Jewish people left. So, but there's Orthodox. That's true, they're Orthodox. but I care about every one of you. Every one of you is a child of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you have a special purpose in the world to promote the Torah, to promote the ideology of the patriarchs. If you intermarry, your children won't do it. That's a fact. We had 50 years of practice. The Jewish people are losing numbers, or at least losing committed Jews. The only way to retain our numbers of committed Jews is by marrying another Jew. Be like Tziporah. Tziporah wouldn't marry a man who believed in a different God. Be just like Tziporah, my friends.